Hello everyone, and welcome to another episode of Coffee Shop Philosophy. As always, I'm your host, Killian Hobbs, the managing editor for think-liberty.com and the news editor for beinglibertarian.com and the family of publications. As always, you can follow us on all of our social media feeds, listen to podcasts wherever you get your podcasts, check out our shop for all the night merch that we have, and go to beinglibertarian.com, think-liberty.com, or rationalstandard.com, and hit the little subscribe bell to get daily updates on all the new articles that we're bringing out. I think that's about as concise as I'm going to get it. I keep saying week over week that I'm going to find a more concise way of doing it. I think that's the most concise way that I'm going to be able to deliver that going forward. So, to the point of the episode today. What I wanted to talk about on today's episode is next steps. So, one thing that comes up a lot when you're doing planning or you're trying to figure out where you want to go in life or anything like that is not knowing how to tackle it. Now, I had a conversation, it was a really lengthy conversation, funny enough, but had a pretty lengthy conversation with Thomas Kilroy, who I've mentioned before. He's kind of our audio software wizard that does a lot of stuff in the background and makes a lot of the podcasts that you enjoy on the Think Liberty Network possible from all the work that he does in the background with us. But I was talking to him, and we went through, some stories and some things we've been through and things that we've done and everything else. And he came up with a suggestion after I was done explaining a few things that covering something like next steps might be a good idea. And I think that in order to really nail this point home, I need to go through a different thing first. And then I can explain some things from personal life experience with the topic, as well as just general strategies and stuff like that you can work with. Now, taking it back a little bit further, I have to laugh at myself a little bit here before I get into this. I have to also stop and laugh at myself at the fact that I keep pausing to say that I need to reference something else at first. That's a really weird speech loop that I seem to have caught myself in there, but that's neither here nor there. One thing I have to laugh at a little bit, as I've mentioned before, I'm not a fan of self-help books. I'm not a fan of self-help topics or these articles of these 5 things are going to change your life. Like, I don't like that stuff. I find a lot of it is very empty and it's just contrived platitudes 9 times out of 10. One that I do subscribe to is something that Jordan Belfort had put out a couple of years back. If you don't recognize the name from his prominence in Wall Street previously, then you may recognize him as the character from Wolf of Wall Street. He was the person that the character Leonardo DiCaprio played was based on, including his rise in the world of Wall Street finance and stock trading and all the shady stuff and the drugs and sex and multiple wives and everything else that was involved in just being Jordan Belfort. But one of the things that he came up with not too long ago, or at least that he started talking about not too long ago, was his 4 key points to become successful. Now, I've used and followed these over the years, and it's always been very useful to me. It's always been something that's gotten me a little bit further and a little bit further along to where I want to be. Some of this stuff I was following without even knowing what it was, and that's something he touches on as well in a lengthy interview that he did with it, like I said, a few years ago, where he says that some people who are successful are doing these things even if they're not conscious of them, but being conscious of them makes it that much easier to take control of it and guide yourself towards success. So, without further ado, I'll jump right into the list here. The first thing that he talks about is vision. Now, one thing a lot of people make a mistake on is having a goal versus having a vision. People think that the goal is the end result. It's the end marker. That's what they're aiming for, and that's all that they need to do. That's not the case. A goal is like a checkpoint. It is a marker for having finished a part of something that's going to lead you to your vision. So, for example, you might have a goal of getting a job that pays 6 figures. That might be a goal, but your vision is having that lifestyle. It's being that guy in that job. It's being that person that has those additional funds to throw around to take vacations every year to Morocco or invest in those startup businesses you see all the time that you're interested in getting involved in. It's something where you can visualize yourself in a specific situation and actually be that person in your mind. And then everything else that you set up from start to finish is going to be based on that. Because again, you can have the goals, and goals are important, but goals are like a checklist. It's one particular thing that you're going to accomplish. It's not a vision. It's not that state of, this is who I want to be. This is where I want to be. So his first step is acknowledging that and having a vision rather than just a loose set of goals. The second thing that he goes into is the ability to manage your state or mood. Now, this one's a little bit more tricky, but he considers it the more important of the four. In this case, it's a matter of being able to control the different states that you're in. Now, he simplifies them into 3 different states: certainty, clarity, courage. Those aren't the states, I should say, but those are the 3 things that you need to be able to control in order to have the states that you want to be in order to put yourself where you need to be. So they're pretty straightforward. The certainty is being able to be certain about what you're doing. The clarity is knowing exactly what it is that you're going to go do. And the courage is the ability to step up and take that dive, take that next step and jump into what you need to do. And again, sometimes, you're going to be angry, you're going to be sad, everything else. I touched on this on a previous episode where I mentioned the need to be able to take a step back when you're assessing a problem. That way it's easier for you to move on with actually solving the issue at hand. You can be angry and sad and upset and confused and all these other things, but the step 2 here is really important. The ability to put that on pause, step back, and put yourself in the state you need to be to do the things that you need and want to do. Everything else that's involved in this or any other kind of planning or anything like that is going to fall apart if you're unable to do that. The third thing on his little checklist that he had there was beliefs. Now, this one sounds a little more flowery, but it's actually a pretty concrete thing. In the case of beliefs, he talks about beliefs being something that governs everything you do. So you can shape your beliefs to be more aligned with your vision. So in this case, one of the examples he gives is some of the people that he used to hire, which were crackheads that just wanted to make a ton of money and they weren't worried about breaking the law or doing anything like that and following along with the relatively shady business practices that he had. But one of the things that he would always tell them was that it didn't matter if he was poor or uneducated or anything like that, because those were limiting beliefs. It had nothing to do with what they were going to be or what they were going to do while working for him. So the belief that, I'm poor, I'm uneducated, I don't know how to do this, I don't have the ability to do this, those are limiting beliefs. You have to flip those completely on their head. You have to say, okay, it's not a belief of, I'm uneducated, so I can't do it. It's the belief of, this is a new opportunity, so I'm going to learn everything. Changing your perception and changing your beliefs from a negative into a positive is going to help everything else flow. It's another one of those key aspects of, if you can control that, then you can get to where you want to get to. The fourth point that he has on here, and I do think that it's pretty interesting that he lists the other 3 things first, because most other people, when they're trying to tell you, these are your steps to success, these are the things you can do, this is the way that you should look at things, when they're trying to pitch you on that sort of stuff, they usually start with this point, but he leaves it till the end because you need to get all of the mental aspects sorted out and in some way organized before you can really crack down on this 4th step. The 4th step, of course, being strategy. It's the plan of action. It's the way that you're going to lay everything out. It's where you're going to put your goals. It's how you're going to lay out your projects. It's how you're going to say, okay, this is step 1A. This is step 37Z. Here's how I'm going to accomplish what I need to accomplish. So it's important to remember that the mental state stuff comes first, hands down. That is going to be the driving point behind accomplishing anything else that you try to accomplish, whether it's your vision in general or building a strategy to accomplish even just a simple goal. You need to be able to control the other aspects that he listed first before you're going to get anything fruitful out of that last point. But the strategy aspect is, like the others, very key. Part of it can be, if you're trying to start a business, then it's being able to say, okay, maybe I need to look for a business mentor, a partner. I need to look into what financing is. I need to study the market a little bit. And you start just building a list and going through all of the things that you're going to need. And then you throw a little project management skill in there and lay it all out in a way that's going to work. Now, you're going to probably ask, I've been going on for probably about 5-10 minutes at this point with this system here. And I said that I was going to do the episode on first steps. Well, this is the point of it. You need to have the background stuff in order to do that next step. However, you don't always need to. Sounds a little counterintuitive, especially with the importance I laid on everything before, but I'll explain. When you're doing your strategy and you're doing the planning and everything else, that in and of itself is a next step. That's you taking that first step from, I have no inertia, I'm not going anywhere, I'm not doing what I want to do, I'm spinning my wheels, to, okay, I'm going to get somewhere. I'm going to make the next step. I'm going to go from A to A1. You might not be jumping all the way to B. You're just going to get a little bit further ahead. And that's what you need to do in order to get anywhere on anything. So using everything else that I've said as a framework, actually approaching that framework can be a next step. Sometimes just that mental adjustment part can be your next step. Sometimes you jump right to the strategy and you need to lay everything out to get an idea of what you need to do. One thing we get caught up on a lot is the next step after that. Because to get where you want to go when it comes to, something in the workplace, something personal, a project you're working on, starting a business, community project, whatever it is you're working on, you need to be able to take that next step first. And then after that, be able to take the step after that, and the step after that, and the step after that. I know that I myself have been guilty of doing a major list, laying everything out and saying, okay, this is what I got to tackle, and then not really diving into it the way that I need to. I've done that, several times. Even to this day, I sometimes catch myself making the strategy part my next step and then not actually tackling it the way that I need to tackle it. One thing you can do to try to avoid those sorts of things, though, is make the next step itself the focus. It sounds strange, again, considering everything else I've said, but if you make the next step itself the focus, then as soon as you've accomplished your first next step, all that's sitting there right in front of you is literally the next one. And then you'll finish that and you'll move on to the next, and so on until you get towards your vision, or at least towards wrapping up the goal that you had in mind. We get caught on the next steps, though. There's usually a next step that all of us are good at. Like for myself, it's a lot of strategic planning stuff. I'm really good at taking, 80 different, more nebulous concepts, laying them all out, and being able to piece them together the way they need to be pieced together in order to map out what a project's going to look like and get from A to Z. I'm really good at doing that layout portion. Execution-wise, well, I'm a little bit more on the average side. There's a lot of work and a lot of things that I do. I have my entire day job, which is pretty time-consuming, all things concerned. I do the editing for all of the news pieces. I do the editing for anything that comes up on Think Liberty and all the scheduling and stuff like that. I record this podcast every week, which includes, hunting down topics and things like that that might be interesting for you, the listener, to go through. I have my new thing a month that I do. There's some stuff SEO-wise and things like that that I do in the background of everything as well. And the only way I'm able to do that is because of the kind of time management stuff and strategic planning side, which is where I excel when it comes to first steps. Now, other people, they can be really good at jumping headfirst into the first task. They might not be that good at doing that step back and taking an overview. They might not be that good at, wrapping everything together or laying it out or anything in that nature. They might not be that good at the mental aspect and doing the self-preparation. A lot of people, if they're going to take that first step, their first step is diving into it head first and just getting something going. Now, normally I would speak against that kind of mentality because, again, I myself am a pretty ardent planner when it comes to these things, but also it's more beneficial to have a full vision, a full plan, and a whole idea of where it is you actually want to go before you jump headfirst into those things. But whatever works to getting you onto that first step is the route you should pursue. Eventually, you're going to have to do the other stuff, but an object at rest stays at rest. An object in motion stays in motion. The best way to get things started and get towards where you want to be is to let inertia happen. Move with it. Jump into it. Take that first step however you need to take it. And that's something that, like I mentioned before with the self-help books and everything else like that, that's something that so many of them ignore, that the people reading the book are not cookie cutter. They're not going to be the same person where the same application of these ideas, the same approach is going to be the way that you need to go in order to be successful at A, B, or C. It's not going to work like that. There's too much variance between people for any one particular strategy to, with 100% guarantee, get you to where you want to be. The only thing that can get you to where you want to be is getting there. And the getting starts with the first step. It starts with taking that next step from having even a faint idea of what it is you want to do, and then just going in, doing it. Now, looping back a little bit on that, what happens quite often when we're starting new projects or taking on new tasks or doing those sorts of things is we will hit that first step. We will take that step after we build up the courage. We get over our apprehensions that are making us afraid of change, and we're not like we've gotten ready to handle that change that's going to be coming. Maybe you listened to the previous episode of one of the podcasts I have here specifically about handling change, and maybe you took that to heart and you started taking some of those first steps to accomplish what you want to accomplish, or at least I hope so. I do these episodes in the hopes that people can take away from what I'm saying and do something with the information that comes their way, that they can get something useful out of it that'll positively affect their lives or in some way benefit them. But I digress. That's a side note. Taking that first step, we take it, we move, we'll get the thing that we're good at done when it comes to a new project or a new idea. We'll be running off of the brainstorming or whatever else, and we're excited, we got the energy, we go into it, and then it comes time to do the other stuff and we fall flat and the project sits to the side and doesn't get done. Or we don't get any closer to our goal than we wanted to. That's the trick of taking that next step, is realizing that if you sign on to take that first next step, you're signing on to take the step after it, and the step after that, and so on. So one thing that I can recommend with that is, again, the strategy component. Do everything else first. Get your brain in a place where you know what the end field is going to look like. Not just one particular goal or anything like that, but you have a true idea of what it's going to look like. You can see it, you can taste it, you can feel it, you know where you want to get this, where you want it to go. When you have that, and you can set your mind up to step back from things, you can control the situation, and you know that you are ready to be there. You've got the belief that you are ready to go and be there. The strategy component, laying everything out. There's tons and tons of resources out there. And I'm not talking about dinky productivity apps that, help you build a spreadsheet that looks prettier than Excel, when really it's just basic goal tracking 101 that a lot of them do. I'm not talking about something empty like that, but there's tons of free education material out there on how to build a strategy, how to actually do maybe the analytics you need to do for it, how to actually manage your time, how to do project management and break things down into smaller goals. You can find different ways to learn all of that stuff, and maybe even learning how to effectively make a strategy can be your next step. Maybe you need to learn how to control your state a bit more and just dive in on the next part because you've already done the strategy piece. That's a next step. You don't have to immediately jump to the I'm in the middle of it, I'm doing it phase. Sometimes it starts with something as small and as simple as learning how to do that next step. Because learning in and of itself is a next step. Another example that I can use here is a guy who goes by the name of David Wong. It's not his real name as far as I know. It might be. I might be wrong there. But he's the editor-in-chief for Cracked magazine. If you remember them, they were I guess you could say the lighter version of Mad, if you will. And they would do pretty much all listicle type articles. They were the ones that made the check out these top 10 blank popular. It was them that started that entire craze and that entire idea of, top 7 this, top 8 this, top 9 this, top 10 this. They're the ones that really created a web presence around that idea. And a lot of their articles, up until probably about, I want to say maybe 3-ish years ago, when they started to go downhill for whatever reasons, they decided to take the slants that they did and go in the direction they did. They really drove home interesting information, some things that were unique, some things that were different, things that you might not have heard or have seen. It wasn't just a stereotypical, here's the 5 best anime that I happened to watch 5 years ago. It wasn't anything stupid like that. It was things like, here's 5 previously unexplored areas on Earth. Here's photos from satellites, and here's information about the area. And there was basically mini articles for each point, rather than just short blurb captions that were just enough to keep your interest until the next point, like so many websites do now. My point with bringing him up is, in one of his articles, he wrote about hard life lessons, things you have to learn to just shut up and deal with so that you can actually get on with life and accomplish something. It was actually his piece where I got the example for the fat guy on the bench and the guy jogging. If you haven't heard that one before, it's basically there's a guy sitting on a bench. He's, a little overweight, just kind of sitting there. Guy runs by with a Brad Pitt body. The guy on the bench says to himself, I wish I had a body like that. And the guy that's running says, yeah, I wish I had a body like this. The two of them saying they want that body type are saying it completely differently. The guy on the bench wants it in a fleeting, whimsical way. The guy that's out running, he actually wants it. He's actually putting the effort in to say, yeah, this is what I want. I want to look like this. So I am going to take all of the steps I need to take to look like this. I got the example for that. I can't remember which episode it was I used it in before, but I got the example from his little article on hard life lessons anyway. One of the things that he touches on, the example I wanted to really use here, was he talks about when he wrote his first book. It's a brilliant book, absolutely a great mix between the macabre and the hilarious. A book called John Dies at the End. Overall, it was absolutely amazing read. Like, I hadn't seen a book like that in a very long time. They did a movie that was not anywhere near as good as the source material, but very rarely is it. But the book was absolutely brilliant. It has 2 sequels now, I think. And when he was talking about writing the book, you have to keep in mind that he was also managing the website and writing articles for it and doing all that. The book was a secondary thing that he wanted to do. He had a vision of making this book happen and putting it all together and getting into that side of publication. And what he said was, the goal every single day without failure was to write at least a page. Like at worst, he would sit down and he would get at least one page of it done every day. No one expects you when you're writing a book to sit down and write all, 80,000 words of a book in one go. It's impossible. Not even extremely prolific writers like Stephen King or the like are going to crack out a novel that quickly. It's just not going to happen. However, he put it to the rule of, doing it at least once every day, getting to that point. Some days he'd write more than others, but he would sit there and he would force himself through at least a page worth of writing devoted to that project every single day until he said, hey, wait, I'm on chapter 10 now. I'm on chapter 12 now. Oh, crap, I'm at the epilogue. Oh, crap, I'm done. And then he put his first book out, and it sold tons of copies. And then the same thing for the sequels that have come out and other books that he's worked on since. It all starts with taking that next step. The next step is, writing that next page. I mean, the first next step was, after he decided that he wanted to do it, his first next step was making that rule for himself so that he could build that habit of every single day, I'm going to sit down and I'm going to write at least a page worth of this book, and building that into his daily routine until he finally hit the point that he needed to hit to make what he wanted happen. Now, one last example I'll use here is a little more personal. Well, it's not me personal, but it's personal anyway. I used to do a lot of community work and things like that, and some of that stuff involved working with at-risk youth and doing things like that. So, I ended up getting familiar with what you could call some unsavory youth in the town, which was a little funny considering that, I was a youth around the same time I was doing a lot of this work, or at least I'd have been considered a youth. There wasn't a major age gap between me and the kids that I was working with on some of the side stuff that I had picked up through my, youth advocacy programs and the like that I was a part of, or committees I chaired and things like that. But there was one guy that I ended up talking to, and I remember this very distinctly. Sitting talking to him, his whole mentality was he's just going to sit around, he's going to get high, he's not even going to finish high school. He doesn't know where he wants to go, what he wants to do. He has no idea of what he wants to accomplish. He had no vision, no motivation for a next step, anything like that. I asked him, okay, so you don't know where you want to end up, and that's fine. But you don't want to be here. You don't want to be in your current state. So take a next step. Just do something to get that inertia going. Get moving. I said, you don't have your high school finished. That closes a lot of doors for you. You don't have the time to go and finish your high school, fine. But at least get your GED or something. Pick between those, decide one, jump into it, get it done. And once you do that, then pick another next step and do something else after that. I saw him after he had finished his GED, and he said, I'm not quite sure what to do now. And I said, well, you got about 1,000 options now, because all those places that weren't going to hire you because you didn't have your high school diploma, you're now open for those jobs. They're likely to hire you with your GED because it's the equivalency. You can go and get a job now and start earning a real income and start building a more legitimate life and work your way through things and go from there. Just pick what you want to do next. Take that next step. Figure out the steps you need to do along the way and take each one as you need to. It was about 2 years later that I ran into him again. And at this point, his entire life had changed. It's about 2 or 3 years, I should say. I always forget the exact timeline because just the way the years fell out. But I remember I saw him again after, and got himself a girl. He got himself a job, warehouse supervisor. So he started off just working in a warehouse as, just some kid had finished his GED, and he was going to move up in the company, and he got a supervisory position. He was making a ton of money for his age, had next to no debts or costs. He, Like I said, he had a girlfriend. He was going to look at a house and maybe settling down a little bit and moving into that aspect of his life. And it was all because he saw the opportunity for another step, so he took it. And when he was somewhere where he wasn't sure what his next step was, he just did as much as he could in the step that he was in. So he might have been just on the ground floor at his job, but he made sure to do as much as he could and learn about what the next steps could look like, so that as soon as an opportunity was available, he could jump on them and take it. So I'm going to wrap up the episode here. My next step is going to be wrapping this episode up. I can hear all of you out there laughing at that joke. That was a perfectly timed joke. The self-depreciatory laugh after made it even better, so you are welcome for that wonderful humor that I delivered to you. And if you didn't think that it was funny, then we agree that was actually probably a pretty lame joke, and as well as the explanation afterwards trying to make it sound really good, but it wasn't good. Anyway, there's a reason why I do a podcast and I'm not a stand-up comedian. As always, if you liked what you heard and you'd like to hear more, I'll see you again next week.